Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Forgive me if I roll my R's a wee bit more than normal today. I'm reviewing a Scottish watch. It doesn't happen all that often and I really do enjoy it when it does. So much so that I'm wearing my kilt to celebrate. Wahey! Sorry about that, I got carried away with myself. I promise it won't happen again. The watch on my wrist today is by Marloe. Marloe are based in Kinross. This is the second Marloe that I have reviewed on the channel. I looked at their Morar model a couple of years ago. The Morar had Morag, the Loch Morar monster on the caseback, kind of a budget Nessie. No such animals on the caseback of this brand new Pacific model today, but the caseback is well worth a look, let me assure you of that. This is one of 4 models in the Pacific range, all celebrating particular milestones in international aviation. You saw the pop-up, I'm sure. This video is sponsored by Marloe. They allowed me to pick the Pacific model of my choice and I chose the 55, the glorious golden one, celebrating the invention of first class travel in 1955. They also let me pick the serial number and I picked number 33. 10 bonus points to you if you leave me a comment letting me know why I picked number 33, especially this weekend. Now the dial on this thing really is a thing of beauty. It is gorgeous, you wait till you see the macro shots. However, it wears very, very specifically. If you're keen on one of these, make sure you stay tuned, make sure you watch all of the wrist shots and watch till the end of the video. Let's flip the camera and have a look at it. Alright, before I get into the large and rather pleasant box today, let's talk price because price always helps to add context. It's not a cheapie today, it's not a rush out and grab 2 of them, but I still think it offers reasonable value for money once you look at the design, once you look at what has actually gone into this one. These are pretty much bang on 2,000 Aussie dollars. That comes in just about a grand UK or 1150 to 1200 US, obviously taxes, etc. Your price may vary. There is, however, a 10% sign up with your email discount code so you can lock 10% off any and all of these prices. 4 model range, all having the same case and all the same base movement, all inspired by slightly different eras, slightly different elements of aviation. The 52 after the Havilland Comet, the 55, my choice, the gold one, representing the opulence of first class travel, the Stealth Black PVD coated 66, mimicking the look of the Blackbird stealth fighter, and the 76 on the right, inspired by Concorde. So I think if you're spending 2 grand Aussie, a grand UK, just over a grand US, you want to feel a little bit special and you want the packaging to reflect that, and I think this does rather well. All natural materials, all biodegradable, no plastic, which is nice to see as well. And you have this lovely pictorial instruction manual with some details on the different models in the range, etc, etc. Some of the design choices that I'll talk about a bit later on. Individually numbered, number 33 is mine as mentioned, and beyond expectation, the company motto underneath, again in leather. But that's what we're here for today. That is the Pacific 55. And somewhat atypically, I'm going to start with a bit of a macro montage. I had done one whole set of macro, my usual top-down outdoor stuff, but when I looked at it, I thought it didn't reflect the colours of this watch, so I binned it all and I started again, and this is my second attempt. It is a beautiful looking watch, this one. The colours are pretty spectacular. It's a kind of straw honey dial, really warm, kind of darkening towards the edges because of the double dome, box dome sapphire crystal, and it's a really nice shade of gold they've used for the coating. And the applied gold indices just pop if you catch them with the right light. I've tried to do my best with the macro. I do hope it does this watch justice. But like I said in the intro, this is a very specific, very particular way of wearing this watch that isn't necessarily reflected by the on-paper dimensions that I'm just about to give you. If you had a look at this one in the catalogue, so to speak, you would expect it to wear quite differently than it does. I'm sure you've heard me say on more than one occasion about a classic 40-20. So 40mm in diameter, 20mm lug width, and this watch has both of those dimensions. That suggests it's going to wear very well on the majority of average size wrists, as does the thickness. 12.3mm thick is not bad at all, especially considering there's a couple of mil of that taken up by a piece of outrageous, almost top hat box dome sapphire crystal. Likewise, 47.7mm lug to lug is also perfectly commensurate with a 40-20. On this supplied leather strap, I got to pick which leather strap. By the way, you can pick from 6 or 7 different ones. I picked this dark brown. It weighs in at 81 grams, suggesting light and comfortable everyday wear. And I'm sure it will be if your wrist is the right shape. Stay tuned. There are a couple of unique design features of this watch, including the case back that I hinted at earlier on. The other is the case. 3 different finishes here, and you have this aeroplane's wing shape profile to it. Uninterrupted surface running all the way from lug tip to lug tip, and then that slightly curved, almost looks like a kind of seagull in profile there. Concave crown as well with the Marloe M in the middle, and 3 different finishes. High polish to the upper surface, which I'm sure you've already spotted, a vertical brush to that upper edge and lower edge and the lug tips, and it's a frosted bead blasted center. Very, very interesting. You can see from the wrist shots that are coming up, it looks different from pretty much every single angle that you view it from. The leather strap I chose in the hope that it would make the gold dial pop even more, and I think it does, is this dark brown number with slightly paler brown stitching. It's embossed nice and thick at the ends. High quality Marloe branded with similarly high quality, high polished in gold buckle and tang, again with the Marloe M that is featured on the crown. The next unique feature of this one, or at least I haven't seen it before, is the case back. Pretty spectacular looking, particularly in this coated gold. Screw on 8 screws, 4 scallops. They manage 100 meters of water resistance from this push-pull crown. Note that you're really going to be getting this one wet anyway. It's not that style of watch. Quick release spring bars there if you do want to swap this leather out for something different at the weekends. But it's that piece of glass that's unique. It is domed. Domed sapphire, it has a slight magnifying effect, so you get to look at that lovely Sellita SW216-1 in slightly more detail than you would if it was flat. And there is the movement. I'm sure you can guess it is Sellita 200 based, which is in turn based on the ETA 2824. This version though, rotorless, 24 joule, manual wind, hacking as well, small second, roughly 40-hour power reserve. Now this one must have seen a little bit of regulation along the way somewhere, because the stated tolerances are -8 to +15 seconds per day, which are far sharper than a standard SW200-1 out of the box. It's not elaborately decorated or anything, but it does look rather good, and we have the Marloe M once more featuring on that main plate. And another nice touch is the etching that dips in towards the piece of sapphire covering the case back. That means that the bubble is unnoticeable on wrist. It doesn't make the watch sit proud, doesn't make it wobble around or anything, because it is all recessed. But that's enough of the back of the watch. Let's have a look at the front of the watch, because as I said, I do think this one is particularly lovely. It's a great colour. There's a very, very fine texture to this one, which you may or may not pick up under macro. Printed branding, Marloe Watch Company above the pinion, and printed markers for that small second, which is a little bit recessed above the 6. Only 2 Arabics are the 12 and a slightly clipped 6 there, with Swiss made either side of it at the bottom, because it's a British company, but these are obviously Swiss made watches with that Swiss made Sellita movement in the back of them. Applied baton indices all the way around, with little circular indices inboard of the batons, which is a nice touch. There's another printed minute track, slightly inboard, as you can see, segmenting the dial into not 1, not 2, but 3 circles overall. And it's a nice handset as well, I think, rather elegant, suits the watch. High polished gold to match the indices, bevel down the middle, but there is a second finish. There's a kind of recessed channel running down the middle of these, which has a similar frosted look to match the side of the case. And one final little touch to point out that you may not have noticed, the dial is actually bold. It drops down at the edges. Have a look at those applied indices. Have a look at the back end, the outer edge, floating in space because of that bold dial. Another nice touch, adds another little piece of visual interest, if you get close enough to pick it up, that is. Alright, the money shot, so to speak, the wrist shot today. I think it looks great. I love that colour on the dial. It is such a nice kind of creamy, pale, golden straw honey. It is just gorgeous. Overall, the watch looks really good. I'm happy with my strap choice. But the watch wears very, very flat indeed. 40-20 it may be, but it doesn't necessarily wear like other 40-20s. Have a look at that side profile again. It looks curved, but actually it runs pretty flat, and those spring bars are located higher than the bottom of the case by some margin. Here's another 40-20 I happen to have lying around. It's my Casio Edifice EFV100. Overall, pretty similar dimensions on these two, but very different side profiles. There's a dramatic downturn to the lugs on the Casio, leading to quite a different positioning of the spring bars, meaning the Casio hugs the wrist, the Marloe always feels like it's sitting on top of your wrist. There is one solution to that problem though. I've got a second wrist. Aha! My left wrist is 7 inches average size, my right wrist is 7¼ inches. Some watches I feel just sit better on a slightly larger wrist than I normally wear my watch on. This Marloe Pacific is one such watch. Overhead legibility is actually alright on this gold model anyway. Those high polished hands do help in that regard, and it's a big dial. No bezel on this one, the sapphire crystal just drops straight into the case, so yeah, it's all dial. Outside natural light, once again you can see those lovely kind of warm honey tones coming off the dial and the case itself, and the domed sapphire crystal doing a reasonable job. I assume there's a little bit of anti-reflective undercoating on there. And once again outside you can see that it looks a little bit awkward on my left wrist. When I show you it down the wrist, I think there's a bit too much gap underneath those lugs, and where the leather strap starts you can see too much air underneath my wrist. But when I switch over to my right wrist, which is larger, the whole thing generally feels much more comfortable, it looks better and it fits better. But what are my moans and niggles? Well, I'm sure you have intimated I've been talking about my biggest one for the last 5 minutes. It doesn't wear like the dimensions suggest it should wear. It doesn't really wear like a 40-48. It wears like a 42-50 or something like that, because the case is just so flat. So if you have a wrist like mine or smaller than mine, yeah, be aware it doesn't hug the wrist at all. It always feels like it's sitting on top of the wrist. If you have a larger wrist and are thinking, great, this is going to suit me to a T, there aren't enough holes in this strap for you. On my right wrist, I'm in the second from the end hole. So if you've got a big wrist, you're going to need to change the straps as well. I wonder if Marloe might like to add 2 different strap options, a medium sized one and a longer sized one for future sales. And this 3-way case finishing and the big scallop down the middle is something you're going to have to get used to. It may have mid-century inspiration and a mid-century dial, but that case is anything but mid-century. I found it a bit of a shock when it arrived, but I must admit I am getting used to it, and there are advantages when you see how dynamic it is in the light. It does rather catch because of the manual crown though. There's a slightly sharp edge here, and you always feel like you're kind of winding the case as well as winding the crown when you are winding that Sellita movement. And then there is that price again, not a dollar dazzler. When you're spending £1,000, $1,000+, nearly £2,000 Aussie on a watch from a small brand like this, I think you have to think extra hard about your purchase. It's not a Hamilton, it's not an Oris, it doesn't quite have the brand cachet of one of these big Swiss watch companies. And if you're a flipper, you need to think super hard about it, because you're going to take a far bigger hit on a Marloe than you would on an Oris or a Hamilton, for example. Now, if this was an Oris or a Hamilton, I don't think anybody would be batting an eyelid about the price. I think there's enough design here. I think there's enough care. I think the materials used are very, very good, very high quality. The whole thing feels nicely screwed together. But it is from a small direct-to-market brand, which I think comes with a slightly different set of expectations. But if you're into the story, if you're into aviation, or if you're into the look, I think this one has a lot to recommend it. Great to review a Scottish watch company bringing something genuinely different to the market. So there you have it. Well done for making it all the way to the end of the video. The Marloe Pacific then, gorgeous if you have the cash for it and if you have the wrist for it. If you'd like a Scottish watch on your wrist but didn't fancy this one, why not check out the Marloe review that I referred to earlier on, or the Acura Wayfarer. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.